Hello everyone and welcome back to the Regeneration Advent Calendar. This is day 4, Spearhead from Space. Once again, I'm joined with Luke.
Yes, hello everyone. And this is the one Ben in particular has been waiting for, because if you followed this channel for about 5 minutes or 5 years, you'll know that he is a huge fan of Pertwee. This is his favourite era, so he's happy to be diving into this. He's in his comfort zone now, aren't you?
Yeah, I feel like I've got my comfy slippers on, cup of tea. I'm ready to dive into some comfort Doctor Who. As much as it's been
your happy place.
It is my happy place. It's my comfort thing. If you're feeling down, you stick a John on and you forget about all your worries and you care and just get stuck into that lovely family feeling of it all, really.
Yeah. But Doctor Who itself had some worries around this time, didn't it? Just before, as it moved to the end of the Troughton era, because ratings were looking a bit shaky, and BBC higher-ups were tempted to just cancel it, cut the losses, and move on. They had another show lined up as well. I think it was going to be Derek Sherwin or Peter Bryan, or it's the same producing team. They were just going to switch them over to a new show, weren't they?
Yes. Derek Sherwin halfway through Spearhead got another gig. So either way, he would have probably left that show anyway. If that did happen. And I think maybe this was the first time when sort of Doctor Who was up against another show trying to compete for viewings and ratings, because it always had Space 1999, all that stuff against it. But yeah, our little show survived. And if you look at the grand scheme of television shows, Doctor Who had been running for 6 years. That's a really good innings for any TV show.
Yeah, it would have had 200 episodes on it by that point. Sure.
And I don't think they would have been missing by that point.
No, that's true as well. So yeah, it was it would have been a good run, but it wouldn't have been quite the run that we ended up getting instead, and we would have missed out on many, many great moments. I might not even be fans today, because had it ended there, I doubt it would have come back again. It wouldn't have quite reached that cult status that it has become. That it's so ingrained in just the public culture, isn't it?
Yeah,
and I think the Pertwee era is what cements that eventually.
Well, I think Pertwee made it this cult show in a way. It became very much a cult thing, and I think John had a hard job as much as Troughton. I feel like people undermine John's role in the show, because the show was in a bit of a dire state. Well, like we said, the War Games was the lowest rated story up until that point.
And unlike nowadays, TV ratings did matter quite a bit more then, because there was no repeats, there was no catch up or anything like that. This was your one and only chance to watch these stories.
So I think having John in the role, who I think's very prolific I think he was a big household name because of the radio work, and this was a big departure for him, because he's very much a man of a thousand voices.
Known as comedic, wasn't he?
He was. I think originally they wanted him to play it like a little guitar and be like this sort of zany, not a hobo character, but sort of that type of feel, a bit similar to Troughton in a way. But it soon shifts away from that as soon as you get to sort of part 2, when Pertwee arrives within the show.
I can't remember who he had the discussion with.
I think it was Sean Sutton.
Where he said, well, how do I play the Doctor? And they said, well, just play John Pertwee. And he went, well, who the hell's that?
That's on every interview John does. It's it's like a monologue, and he's just memorized that. It's ingrained.
It's like that one where he looks like he's sat in a caravan, isn't it?
Yeah. I think Pip Madeley did a compilation of just that same story, just different clips of Pertwee throughout his life telling that story. But another thing about this show in particular with season 7 is the episode count was cut because the schedule was killing Troughton off. Stories were falling through, and
I think the transition to colour was also part of the reason they cut it.
which again,
I think
bit
it
of trivia
up
there.
production costs and stuff, so they had to save money somehow.
I think production costs were probably lower as well with season 7. Well, I say Pertwee in general because you had the Earthbound stuff. You didn't have to worry about constructing an alien spaceship or whatever. You just had a set you have at your disposal with Earth.
Derek Sherwin also had the idea to mostly do 7-parters now so that you could stretch that budget out on actors and sets a bit more over the space of a longer serial rather than having to rebuild things, remake things every few weeks if they were to do shorter ones. And yet Derek Sherwin's also the man behind the idea to bring it back to Earth, wasn't it? Go back to basics, make it feel like Quatermass, and give it a more harder edge to it, which did eventually soften quite quickly after season 7. But I think it was what the show needed to grab the audience again.
Because we first sort of had this style in the Invasion, you could argue Web of Fear, but I feel like it's very prominent in the Invasion because that is a proto-Pertwee story, and that's maybe why I really love the Invasion.
It's very much a backdoor pilot, isn't it?
It is, very much so.
You got the Brigadier in his chocolate bar outfit, that, as Nicholas Courtney liked to call it.
Yeah, it always feels like, again, that's partly why season 7 feels so radically different to anything what's gone before and after.
And I mean, Spearhead particularly so, but we'll get into why in a little bit. But first, do we want to have a bit of a chat about John?
Am I gonna say
the man
no
himself?
Am I gonna say no to a chat about John? Absolutely
never
not.
In a million years.
Never in a million years.
You're English. You'd never say no to a cup of tea. You're a Pertwee fan. You'd never say no to a chat about John.
No. John is my family's doctor. I watched Spearhead with my nan. She enjoyed it a lot. It was a fun time. We had a good time with it all. But yeah, John's just ingrained in my family with Wurzel Gummidge. And like I was saying earlier, he had a hard job to bring people back to Doctor Who. And I think that he very much built the foundations for Tom to skyrocket. I think the viewing figures are about 5 million. I think by the time John at his height would be getting 10, 11 million, especially when you get stuff like the Daemons. That broke records, and that meant it to get an omnibus repeat in the summer. And I think John was the first Doctor to really embrace convention life. He was always in the regalia. And I think even after Doctor Who, he was the Doctor. I feel like he was the Doctor of the 90s as well.
Yeah, he was very much the face of the show during the 90s. I think he was the one who had the most repeats.
Yeah, because he had massive repeats in Australia. So it's on like the Videos Check and Lies, that special feature where it's like people were, writing to people in Australia going, can we have those and we'll give you Peter Davison stories.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think John was one of the most sold in like the videos, because like the Pertwee Years was one of the most highly sold VHS releases. And it's weird to think there was a time when people weren't that keen on John's Doctor, that they just didn't feel like that was Doctor Who. But now I think John's had that renaissance and is very much well loved within the fan community, I feel.
Yeah. I feel like the Pertwee era itself it's slightly different from the rest of Doctor Who, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so its fans like yourself almost have their own sort of particular Doctor Who identity as a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah, in a way I feel like I've built it's wrong to say brand out of the Pertwee era, but I feel like that is my jam.
Yeah.
Not to
your name is Pertwee Smith 11 after all.
Yeah, it's wrong to make it sound a bit corporate, but in a way, Pertwee is my brand. I'm known as the Pertwee fan, because when the Big Chief Pertwee figure came out, I was like, what do you make of this? Like, people were messaging me, so I feel like anything for Doctor related or Pertwee, people are like, what do you make of this? What's your opinion?
They come to you, don't they?
I'm more than happy to give my opinion on it, because it's such a special time in the show. And
like we say, you're never going to turn down a chat about John.
No, and it just watching the end of Spearhead and just having that smile from John, I was like, it's the start of something special.
It truly is.
And I'm sure we'll dive into that in a minute. But I guess that's our John talk over, unless you want to add anything more to it.
I mean, how do I follow that, really?
I feel like I've just waffled for the past 5 minutes, so apologies.
I mean, I don't mind. I'm sure the audience doesn't mind either. But yeah, I do really love the Pertwee era. It probably is my favorite era of the show, and it is very much the most consistent, I would say.
Yes.
Like the 70s, like from 1970 to 1977 thereabouts, is the most consistent run of episodes on the show for me. Like, you pick up anything from that time, and I'm not likely to say no to it.
Yeah.
I feel like even though Troughton is my Doctor much more, I feel like there's more Troughton episodes that I'll turn my nose up at. I think definitely the production issues behind the scenes do sometimes seep in. You do have a lot of greats from that era as well, but I think overall, Pertwee through Twirly Baker is where the show is at its most consistent, and you can see why it did skyrocket in popularity again during this time. And even Dalek Mania again had a mini revival, didn't it, around the time of Planet of the Daleks?
Well, the story is definitely that, because you've got the greatest hits of Terry Nation.
Yeah, that's very true.
Which, in the grand scheme of things, makes sense, because most people watching the show probably wouldn't have seen the original Dalek story. So you can forgive it.
Yeah. I mean, Terry Nation was a man who'd like to reuse a lot of his ideas, but we can't begrudge it for it.
I mean, I guess going to Spearhead, it is very much sort of a template for everything gone since with a Post Regeneration story, in a way, I feel.
Yeah, they're getting their the handle on it a bit more now, aren't they? I mean, it's only the second one, actually. Even though it's the third Doctor, you sort of forget sometimes that it is the second post-regeneration story.
Because you get sort of the Doctor's physiognomy explored a bit more.
Yeah, the first mention of two hearts.
Yeah. So it just feels more of a big occasion now, and I feel like you're learning more and more about the process. I feel like it deals with the regeneration trauma a bit better than Power.
Maybe because Power, it's more just him acting a bit silly, but no actual physical repercussions on that. Whereas Pertwee is knocked out in this story, isn't he? He's like spends the first half of it in bed.
Maybe because in the hospital setting as well, it just feels like, oh damn, this is heavy stuff for the Doctor. I mean, let's get into part one's cliffhanger. Who told you to blooming, you get to graze to the scalp?
Yeah,
and it's just great, that whole medical stuff, learning about like he's in a deep coma and all that.
Self-induced.
Yeah, which becomes like a running thing in the third Doctor, like start a planet of the Daleks, induce it into a coma as well.
Yeah, it's very much, it's laying down things mythology-wise, isn't it? Without it feeling like it's being shoved in your face. It's not like, these are big reveals. It just feels like a natural resetting of stuff. Because before this, it's sort of like, it's unclear whether or not he is human or something else sometimes. Like, it feels like the show forgets where it started with the Doctor and Susan being aliens, and sometimes does just treat the Doctor as if he's human.
Because you have the big revelation in War Games of the Time Lords. So this was like a nice little follow-on from that we're learning a bit more about our intrepid time traveller.
Yeah, who is no longer travelling in time.
He's on exile.
Yeah. I suppose, speaking of learning a bit more, shall we learn a bit more about the behind the scenes of this story, go into a bit of trivia?
Yeah, let's say, what trivia have you got?
I mean, first story in colour.
Oh, I haven't noticed that one.
Big ones. First appearance of Jon Pertwee, because unlike most other Doctors, he didn't appear at the end of the previous story after the regeneration, as it were.
And then John's costume was his grandfather's. That's a nice little thing, but it was an actual BBC costume. Soon became BBC costume in season 8 when he had 2 costumes made for one for Terry Walsh and one for him. That's always a nice little story that he paid Terry Walsh a bit extra to keep the costume clean so he could take it home with him for conventions. So there's a nice little bit of fun fact there.
Yeah. First appearance of Liz Shaw as well, played wonderfully by Caroline John. And I think it's easy to forget because of all the monumental stuff in this story, with it being the first Third Doctor story. That is also her debut. But she does get off to a very good start. It's a good story for Liz.
Yeah, like, part one, it's very much her and the brig propelling the story forward, isn't it?
And she even is a key part of the resolution at the end, isn't she? Where she's fiddling about with the Doctor's machine to get it to work.
Yeah, she's twisting a few knobs and wires.
Yeah, she's sort of very much part of this attempt to make the show more adult, isn't it? By having this scientist who's very much qualifications in pretty much everything, doesn't she?
Well, I think it fits what Derek's show and vision was, that it wants to move away from jelly monsters and be more hard-hitting. And you definitely get the hard-hitting with season 7. It's like what Benji Clifford said, that it is Doctor Who made by ITV Thames TV. A bit more trivia.
Misquoting Terror of the Autons, Miss Shaw fulfills that function admirably, doesn't she?
She does, yes, for sure.
Yeah, she very much suits the show in this period. But yeah, a bit more trivia is that there was a technician strike around this time, and so they couldn't get into studio to film it. And I don't know whether they were considering just postponing it or cancelling the production entirely. But Derek Sharon just turned around and said, well, give us some film and we'll go on location and shoot it all like that.
I think this was September 69, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably would have been about then. Much to the shock of some BBC higher-ups, because they were thinking, oh, no, it'd be too expensive. But I don't know whether it ends up being cheaper or not. I think Derek Sharon claimed it is, but it probably does more even out more than being cheaper. And so that opens up a whole new world of possibilities for this story, doesn't it?
It's one of the best happy accidents for the show, I feel. Because I think we both watched the Blu-ray version for this.
Yeah, that high, crisp quality of it, because with film, with the original film being maintained all this time, they're able to get some really good restoration work out of that and get in true HD rather than just an upscale like you get with most of the Blu-ray sets.
And I think it being on film and it all being on location, it makes it feel more of a big striking change, because this is the first proper reboot and reshuffle in Doctor Who's history, really. It's moved away from the fluffiness of the 60s to the hard-hitting, grounded 70s.
And it gives it so much more scale as well.
Yeah, like the selection of shots what are used, because it's sort of handheld footage, especially in part one, where you get sort of the press and you get a sort of the live footage of that with the brig on there, and it just feels very creative. And instead of like the free camera setup of going camera 1 please, camera 2, then back to, it just feels very different. And it's
freed from its shackles.
Yes, and it's real. It's a shame watching Spearhead going, damn, I wish the other stories were like this.
But I mean, Barry Letts was very big on CSO, and he took over as producer just after this, going into the Silurians. And so I think he was very keen to stick with video, because that allows for CSO. You can't do CSO on film. And so he was big on expanding that technology, which is fair enough. But you could see, I think at the time, it probably wasn't too different quality-wise between film and video. But now, where it comes to the technology we have to expand and upscale this stuff, you really can see a huge difference between the two.
Like, this is going to sound really sad, but hey, I'm going to say, I'm the Pertwee fan. You can see the little patterning on John's shirt, and you're like, I've never noticed that before, but it's so crystal clear. Like, this is so. It feels like it was made yesterday.
It feels very much like you're watching a film from the 60s or 70s, doesn't it?
It doesn't feel like it's for 70s, but I know it's made in 69, but it doesn't feel like we've quite transitioned into 70s Doctor Who as we know it. So yeah, it's so good. So good.
Yeah, I mean, we could praise the film quality for ages, couldn't we?
Oh, yeah.
And just the direction that it allows. Again, so good. So many just wonderful moments. It'd be great one for us to sit down and do a commentary on, even. And just gush over every little detail that comes along. But yeah, I suppose another little bit of trivia is the working title was Facsimile.
Yes, which works for the Autons very well.
Mm.
Sam Seeley would have had a son, but again, budget restraint for this, so that was cut.
You can't imagine him being a great father, to be honest. So it was probably a mercy there.
Maybe a sandwich one. Yeah, not a very. Yeah, he's a bit of a rogue, isn't he? That character, Sam Seeley.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a lovable one, but you wouldn't like him in real life.
oh no,
Lovable as a TV character, but yeah.
I know for sure. What other bits of trivia have we got for it? It was filmed at a BBC location, wasn't it? The hospital was used for it was a BBC training thing, wasn't it? Camera for directors.
Ah, I see.
So that's how they got hire of the building. And that's where we get is it our first case of a doctor being naked on screen? Question mark.
Yeah, I imagine so. With the shower scene, yeah.
And that allows us to start a trend in Regeneration Stories where doctors steal their costumes from hospitals.
Yeah, I mean, how many stories is that at now? Is it 3?
So you've got Pertwee, McGann,
Yeah.
and then Matt Smith, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, 3.
Yeah. 2 of which are in your what's it called? The title of your channel. So what's that say about you?
I like stealing clothes from hospitals. What can I say?
There we go.
And then speaking of that little hospital moment about changing, the scene where the windscreen wipers goes off on the red car before it becomes Bessie. I guess I'm going to call that car Betsy. Was ad-libbed by John, which was nice.
Wonderful little moment there.
Yeah, it's really great stuff. And I'm sure we'll talk about John's character when we get into our thoughts. It's positive for sure. This one.
I mean, we've also got a new title sequence here. The first title sequence in colour, funnily enough, for the first story in colour.
Is it Bernard Lodge did this one?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
And I think this is the one where it had sort of the moving text. They soon got rid of the moving text, didn't they?
Yeah, zooms towards you, doesn't it? Same with the ambassadors. But yeah, that's about all that we see of that.
Yeah, because it feels like a nice little creative choice. That I like it.
It adds a bit of action to the titles, I suppose, doesn't it?
It gives it more of a sense of movement as well. You're traveling through that vortex.
Yeah, it's more dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that all for trivia?
Yeah, I believe so.
Should we
talk about how this is a fresh start for the show?
Why not? Why not?
Yeah.
So do you want to take it away?
Yeah. It's also a bit of a fresh start. No, let's not do that one.
Okay.
Sorry, I just tried to think of the right words.
This is the joy of doing it. It's all recorded.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is a good one so far. I'm happy.
Yeah, it's going well. This is also the first sort of soft reboot of the show entirely, isn't it? Because we're not starting off with any familiar traveling characters, as it were. It's a new doctor, new companions. They all departed at the end of the war games. We've got the Brigadier still, who's a known quantity from the previous era, but it's not quite the same, is it? It is the first proper relaunch, I suppose.
Yeah, because the Brig is very much the leading man for the first part. And I wonder if audiences would have had a big attachment to him, going into it now. We're a big Brigadier fans. So it'd be interesting to see how audience resonated and connected with that.
Yeah, when they first really got attached to him. Because you don't... Yeah. It's also wondering how well the TV production side of things can engage with that, because you can't go online and check the message board to see which characters are people talking about. You do just have to go off of how you feel, maybe ratings, how they go down, and just how the production team feel it goes down. Probably word of mouth as well a little bit.
Or you get little Timmy writing a letter to the BBC going, I like that Brigadier. Bring him back, please.
You do quite a lot of letters, don't you?
So maybe you would have had that, and there'd been a little Brigadier fan club back then. Who knows?
But yeah, I suppose he's also the first character to go from guest to regular.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all like the other companions were mostly chosen. Yeah, they were all like chosen beforehand. Sometimes I think they didn't quite know, like with Victoria. I think while they were writing Evil of the Daleks, they were hedging their bets a bit there because they were considering having Molly be the companion, weren't they? The maid.
Yeah, I feel like Molly
I
probably
think-
had more character, but that's another debate.
But I think by the time Deborah Watling was actually cast, she was cast as a series regular.
Yeah.
That was the contract she signed. She didn't sign on for Evil. And oh no, actually, Fraser Hines, to be fair.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was like offered it during the production. But still, it's like it's not someone who's come along before and then been brought back into the show. It's like it was decided during production to keep them on.
Well, Peter Purvis, like, just because he got on with Bill Hartnell, it's like, oh, we'll have him as a companion. So I guess that doesn't count because it's different characters, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's still within the same serial as well, even if it
Yeah.
is a couple of weeks on. But yeah, so it's a bit of a grey area, I suppose, that one. But nevertheless, there's a point being made there of sorts. I'm sure someone else could have made it better, but well. Shall we dive into the synopsis now?
Yeah, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so part one, we open up with zooming in from space, don't we? Similar to the start of Rose.
You can really see how this era influenced modern day Doctor Who.
Yeah. And this is very much it's just a grander start to the story, isn't it, than you'd expect from what you've seen in the 60s.
Yeah. I mean, I always feel like you'd want to see the TARDIS come crashing down with the Nestine spheres as well. I know somebody's done like a fan edit of it.
Oh, really?
But it almost feels like a bit of a shame we didn't get that moment there just to be proper, like, this is big, you know? Because I think that'd be quite more of an action-packed, punchy start as well.
Right. But I think instead it's going for a bit more of a creepy mystery, isn't it? As we cut to the unit radar technicians scanning the skies and noticing some meteorites falling down in formation. Or are they
thunderbolts, they call them?
Yeah. And then they come crashing down into some woods. Meanwhile, in those very same woods, the TARDIS materializes and a new man steps out and falls flat into the heather, isn't it?
Yeah.
Face first. They're making an effort to hide his face, even though we've just seen it in the titles.
And this is the first time we see a Doctor in the previous incarnation's clothes as well.
Even though it made sense for Troughton to be in Hartnell's clothes, they sort of shifted that around a bit, didn't they?
But they're John's own Chelsea boots. They're not Troughton's little shoes he has.
So not quite the...
Not quite. We're not quite there
I mean, I imagine they would have squashed John's feet a bit.
Oh, yeah, he wouldn't have fit in them at all.
Yeah. But yeah, so meanwhile, over in... I think it's probably London, isn't it?
I think it is.
HQ. A new scientific advisor is being brought in from Cambridge, Liz Shaw, and she has her first meeting with Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. And it's a wonderful little scene as he explains what UNIT is and that they deal with the odd, the unexplained, anything on Earth and even beyond. You know, it's just some cracking dialogue in this story. It truly is. Yeah. And so from there, we have the Doctor brought into the hospital, isn't he?
Yes.
And they've examined him a bit. It's Dr. Meredith, I believe. No, Dr. Meredith is the Silurians.
It's Henderson, isn't it? Henderson.
Yeah, Dr. Henderson. There we go. Dr. Henderson here. And he sort of phones in to the X-ray department to say, why has this man got two hearts? Are you having a joke or something over there? But instead of the X-ray department, he gets the blood department, doesn't he? And they're saying, you sent us something that's not human bloods. You know, and so they think he's playing a practical joke on them, but no, he took it from the patient himself. So he is a bit confused there. The doctor himself is a bit confused as well. He's wondering where his shoes are.
So before that, you get on that conversation, you get Mullings overhearing
the
that.
porter.
Yeah.
He's overheard that, and so he grabs the phone himself and phones the press, and they all swarm in on the hospital
He's in the
to work
Green
out
Death,
what's
isn't
going
he?
on.
Mullins. Well, not Mullins himself, but the actor is.
Yeah, he's Welsh, isn't he?
Yeah.
So that's probably why they got him back for the Green. Oh, we had a Welsh actor once, didn't we? Let's get him on. Yeah, now we've got a Welsh third Doctor.
God, that's a weird link to Web of Fear, because you get the driver in Web of Fear. I'm just a driver. That's more than my job's worth.
Oh yeah.
And in this, he's got, oh no, I can't leave through that. That's more than my job's worth.
Yeah, and then I can't let you down the mine. It's more than my job's worth.
There you go. It's the same character, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it is. It's the same.
Yeah.
Definitely the same actor in Green Death as well. Yeah. Oh, I can't remember the character's name.
I can't remember.
Private Evans, that's it.
Oh yeah. For Web of Fear.
Yeah, I can't remember Green Death though. But yeah, he's one of the miners there. But yeah, back to Spearhead from space now. So all the reporters have swarmed in, along with a strange man who none of them recognize, and he doesn't seem to be there on a story at all. He just seems to be prowling around a bit, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, having just about convinced Liz Shaw to go along with him, she's very skeptical about it all. And he's like, Miss Shaw, I don't chase shadows. But yeah, so they then head off to the hospital because he is excited to see his old pal the Doctor again. After all this time, he heard that the police box has been found in the woods. A strange man's been brought to the hospital. It must be him. So he turns him over, and no, it's not the man he recognised. He's someone completely different. But this man in the bed recognises him, doesn't he?
Yes.
And so then from there, they're advised not to move the Doctor just yet. And so they the Brigadier and Liz head off, and the Doctor has some orders for I can't remember the captain's name. Munro, that's it, Captain Munro. He says armed guard on the police box, doesn't he?
With live ammunition, which is going to come back to haunt us.
Yeah. And so then what comes on next? They also find the bit of meteorite, don't they? The shell of.
I think that's in part. I think that's in part 2. I think.
No, I believe it's part 1. It's out on. Oh, maybe it's part 2.
I think it's part 2 because it's once Brigadier's leaving the hospital.
Yeah, I think it must. Yeah, they don't quite leave just yet, do? No, I swear the Brigadier and Liz aren't around though when the attack happens.
Well, maybe.
I thought they went back to. Oh no, but then they are back there afterwards when he's shot. So yeah,
I've got a feeling it's part 2.
Yeah, I think something like but
yeah.
Anyway, the Autons attack, kidnap the Doctor, try to get him away, but he's like feigning being unconscious. Just as they're rolling him up into the ambulance, he grabs the wheels and rolls away. The action starts going as he's on a roll down the hill. Unit troops are shooting at the ambulance, trying to stop it, trying to get the tires. Then they're chasing after the Doctor. They find a little bundle in the woods, but no, it's just his pillow and blanket. He is nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, over by the TARDIS, the 2 soldiers there hear some stumbling in the trees. Holt, who goes there, load their guns, bang, right on his forehead. Who told you to fire, you stupid? Cut to credits.
Dang. So we get our lovely bit with the Doctor getting shot with a grey to the scalp. He's returned to the hospital and is now in an induced coma.
Yeah, self-induced,
Self-induced, yeah. So this is when we get Munro has retrieved a fragment of the Nestine sphere, and that gets taken to Unit HQ for Liz to examine. And this is when we get introduced to another factor of this story, the plastic factory, where we have, I think, going back to the trivia, I think we have a Fleetwood Mac song being played when you see the production line of the dolls.
Yeah, that just feels so different for Classic Who, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the way that factory scene is shot.
Yeah, it's so wonderfully done. I guess it makes it very contemporary. doesn't it? By having that piece of music in a way. I think people forget about that actually, but there is, pop music or chart music in Doctor Who.
I wonder if that's the first time since The Chase.
I would argue probably is the second time, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, no, you do get in An Unearthly Child, though.
Oh, yeah. The Common Men, isn't it, in that?
Yeah. But yeah, back to Spearhead.
Yeah, back to Spearhead.
So we're in the factory now.
We're in the factory and we get introduced to John Ransom, isn't it? Who has been away in America for 6 months, and he goes to his office and it's out of bounds, and he goes to see Hibbert, this is very much the start of, I would say, Robert Holmes's double act in a way with Channing and Hibbert, but it's not a comedic double act.
It's not a comedic one, isn't it? But there definitely are a pair. Channing's always hanging over Hibbert's shoulder, like mentally influencing him, isn't he?
Yeah.
I do like the subtle touches, like the secretary who shows Ransom up is obviously an Auton. Like, you look at her, the orangeness of her skin.
I mean, that could be any woman from Essex at this point.
You have like the same thing with the ambulance drivers as well. The ones who, I mean, Monroe even says, like, in the reports from the people who saw them, that there was something odd about their faces. And it's like nice about that disconnect from humanity, where Ransom's trying to make conversation with her, like, "You're new, aren't you?" And she's like, and there she's just like, "All men are the same."
Yeah. Oh, damn. Here we go.
Yeah, she just has a completely blank dismissiveness of him.
And I think, well, it might be down to like a budget reason as well, because it costs more to pay if you have a speaking role as well. But yeah,
it adds to the creepiness of the whole situation.
Yeah,
the factory. Yeah, you could tell something's not right.
That's another advantage of it being on location, I feel, as well.
Yeah, you also have like the whole new policy. We've got a new policy bit, and you could tell like that's Channing's influence over Hibbert, isn't it?
Yeah,
the cracks are starting to show in the ruse.
Because Ransom's got this electronic doll. We don't actually get to see the doll in action. We probably becomes a troll doll in Terror of the Autons. But they have moved away from dolls and more wax, plastic, life sculptings and that sort of thing.
Facsimiles, ones for shops.
Yes.
Yeah, mannequins for shops.
Yeah, mannequins. So that is basically let go John Ransom. So he's not quite done with it yet, but we'll return to his story later on. So we get Liz examining the Auton control sphere, what we have, and then we're introduced to one of our main players, which is General Colonel Scobie, who is the liaison of the army and unit. He's sort of a go-between.
Major General Scobie.
Major General. I think it is. Yeah,
he's the go-between, but we never see him again after this story.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably scarred and retired.
Yeah, that's probably why a lot of them never show up for more than one story.
Yeah, Paul Munro as well, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, because we get Liz joking about all the TARDIS. Yeah, because the TARDIS was transported to Unit HQ in this one, and so we get the TARDIS in the little makeshift lab, which is very nice.
You have Liz being very tongue-in-cheek, don't you?
Yeah.
And she's like very much laughing in the Brigadier's face in a way.
So while that's happening, our good old Doctor thinks, "I've had enough of lying around in bed. I'm going to the TARDIS."
Yeah, a professional examiner's been brought in for him as well.
Yeah, Doctor
with a lovely car.
Yeah, lovely old jalopy, and he steals his cloak and hat, I think, as well. But yeah, the hat doesn't make it out much.
No, he like puts it on and then quickly dismisses that, doesn't he?
Well, he has a flat cap, and then he has the I mean, we're jumping the gun a little bit, but then he has like the fedora, what Tom has really.
Yeah.
So I like that scene when it goes like doctors only, and I'm like, oh, that's a nice little touch. Like, it's completely for the story, but I'm like, that's really nice.
Yeah, it's like one of those meta jokes, isn't it?
Yeah,
a bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, I like that. So we get John having a good old shower, and I guess this is a fan favorite, the tattoo, the mark. I guess people have said that's the mark of the Time Lords for the Exile. So we get a sort of a confrontation well, not confrontation, but a moment between Henderson and the Doctor, what's been brought in. They depart, and off the third Doctor goes, puts his outfit on, and escapes hospital and goes to Unit HQ, where he becomes enlisted by the Brigadier. And then we return to the plastic factory where Ransom is going to see what's behind his workshop, only to discover it's been completely changed and there's a load of plastic. Oh yeah, we get Sam Seeley. I'm jumping the gun away. We'll rewind a little bit.
To be fair, I've missed out Sam Seeley in part one as well.
We have Sam Seeley. He was collected one of them Thunderbolts, the Auton. He has the main control swarm unit, I think.
Yeah, it's like the swarm leader, they call it.
Swarm leader, that's it. So he's got that in a metal trunk.
Yeah. So his wife's a bit suspicious of him there.
You can tell it's not a happy marriage. So we've got that, and this is when we're introduced to the Auton roaming the forest to try and retrieve that. But because the signal's muffled, he can't quite locate it.
Unit troops do end up finding another one, though.
Yes.
And then while they're transporting it back, the Auton attacks them. And that's one of those things that's very well done on film, I mean, that probably would have been anyway, because that would have been location footage. But even so, just like the way it runs off the road and then the camera spinning around. Yeah,
and that's quite a grim moment as well, seeing like the blood. Like it's one of, that's a bit hard hitting for Doctor Who.
That officer said that poor boy's face was terrible to look at. So it must have frightened him dreadful before he died. And she's saying, like, very much knowing that he's up to something and trying to scare him.
Oh, good old Meg. But yeah, fast forward back to Ransom. He's in his little workshop, and this is when the Auton comes to life, and that is how episode 2 ends.
So, and then we dive into part 3, where Ransom just narrowly avoids being killed by the Auton, doesn't he? It's come to life. It's chased him out the factory. But at the same time that this is going on, General Scobie is being shown round because he is going to have a, not quite a waxwork, but a plastic facsimile made of him to go into Madame Tussauds, isn't he?
Yeah.
And so you have that nice little scene where Channing notices the Auton, just gives him a bit of a glare. It almost reminds me of Anthony Heads in
I see that
at that point. Like it's that same shot where it's like looking down, isn't it? Just before the face off.
Yeah, there's a nice bit of character in that.
Yeah, but then the Auton just sort of sulks back, doesn't it? It like tilts its head down in shame and slowly walks back through the door.
No total destruction for that Auton today.
Sadly not. But yeah, so meanwhile, the Doctor has agreed to work with Liz and the Brigadier on this. So he's like helping to examine the plastic. But he's like, oh, well, no, what we really need is the whole thing. We can't really do too much with just this small fragment. Meanwhile, Ransom ends up found by the unit troops, and they send him over to the Brigadier to be interrogated to find out what exactly is going on with this factory. And so the Doctor, not really wanting to stick around too much, he's got itchy feet, doesn't he, at this point in his life. He wants nothing more than to just get away from Earth and resume his travels. So he tricks Liz into stealing the key off the Brigadier. Liz isn't really convinced that anything's going to be going on with the TARDIS at this point. She thinks it's all just some mad story the Doctor's come up with. But nevertheless, he tries to escape, but the Time Lords have changed the dematerialization codes, and so he is stuck on Earth now for good. And so, meanwhile, Mrs. Seeley is looking in the trunk, isn't she? While Sam Seeley has gone over to the unit troops to say, oh, is there a reward for these Thunderbolts? Go home with a bit of money, I reckon.
Spend it on the whippet on the dog race, probably.
But he ends up instead stuck there. Meanwhile, his wife, Mrs. Seeley, opens up the trunk to find out what he's been hiding, and the swarm leader starts emitting. It's no longer cloaked now, so the Auton can hunt it down. Ends up knocking her out, doesn't it?
Yeah. But
And
the
so they sort of like the Brigadier,
Monroe
yeah,
and the
the
Doctor.
Brigadier like visits Monroe, doesn't he? Because
Yeah.
Monroe's the one interrogating Mr. Seeley. They have a little chat about what's been going on, and the Brigadier, the Doctor, and Liz go to Seeley's house to fetch the energy unit, and arrive just in time to scare the Auton off because it's not ready yet for a full engagement with unit, I believe is how...
Full-scale attack, isn't it? I
yeah,
think.
as Channing describes it. And so instead they decide they're going to use subterfuge to get it back. Meanwhile, the Brigadier, Liz, and Doctor go to visit the factory itself and have a chat with Hibbert about what Ransom's told them, while the Auton then goes after Ransom, doesn't it? And we get the total destruction scene where it cuts through the back of the tent and completely destroys his body. And so while they're at the factory, the Brigadier notices Channing and recognizes him as the man who led the raid on the hospital. So he knows that something's fishy is going on there and just needs to get permission so that he can perform a raid of his own on the factory. And so we're back at Unit HQ. The Doctor and Liz now have the full energy unit to analyze, and they use the EEG, is it?
Yeah, electro pulse. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same machine that was used on the Doctor to work out that he was in a coma, and they realised that there's some form of intelligence in the sphere. And so the Brigadier phones up General Scobie, and he's like, "Oi, can I go raid this place, please?" And the General's like, "Oh, well, I was there earlier. They seem like a pleasant couple of chats, but that sounds pretty serious. You better go do that." "Sorry, Brigadier, there's someone at the door," and General Scobie opens the door to find he's looking into a mirror, because the waxwork facsimile, plastic facsimile, is not destined for Madame Tussauds. He is. And cut to part 3's credits.
Yeah, so episode 4, we have the facsimile on the phone saying factory is off limits to the Brigadier.
Yeah, they got some important work going on there. Mustn't be disturbed.
So the Doctor and Liz, they go to Madame Tussauds to have a closer look at these sort of facsimiles, because this is when we sort of get the hint of maybe that wasn't the real General Scobie, and the Brigadier's off to get higher authority, trying to get away around that. So we are exploring Madame Tussauds, where we realise that there are quite high regarded civil servants, I think they are.
Yeah, it's like there's no famous personalities, as Liz says. It's funny, the third Doctor likes his days out, doesn't he?
Yeah.
The same in Terror of the Autos. I've not been to a circus in ages, so I'd like to go there.
Why not? He's got a bit of fun while he's on exile, I guess.
See the sights.
So the Doctor examines...
We could visit the caves.
Yeah. Do a bit of potholing. Yeah.
Make a nice trip for us.
So we go back and see General Scobie has got a watch, but it's wound and it's telling the correct time, which means something's not adding all up. So the Doctor and Liz go into hiding, and the attack is slowly being prepared because Channing and Hibbert arrive, and off the civil servants go to take their places. And I think this is where the Auton plan really comes into fruition with it.
Yeah, they're like going to replace all the top civil servants, aren't they? Before this as well, you have Major General Scobie going to Unit HQ and getting the energy unit that the Doctor and Liz were working on, because no one else is around, and he sort of like orders Monroe to part with it.
Yeah, which is quite a tense moment, because like he's offered to be like arrested and all that sort of stuff for like acting against orders. So yeah, that's all good stuff. So the unit's returned, and now we get to see the nesting consciousness become it's complete, really, isn't it? It gets sort of zapped into the machine.
I love the whole non-tangible side, I suppose, of the nesting consciousness. It's this idea of life not as we would imagine it, because they like make their own form, and the idea that Channing isn't the one. Yeah, Yeah, that's what I was going for. Channing's not the one who's like deciding what it's going to look like. It will make its own form, perfectly adapted to life on Earth. And I think it's always more fascinating when you've got a alien threat like that, like you say, non-corporeal, like slightly less tangible.
And I think this is when Hibbert goes against Channing and he gets total destruction. So, with the sphere gone, the Doctor and Liz begin constructing a gadget to defeat the Nestines.
Yeah, like interrupts the radio signals, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of a yeah, because it was like if we knock out one of them, we've knocked out the whole lot, isn't it? We get that when the Doctor confronts Channing.
Yeah.
But this is when the invasion starts, which again, I feel like this story has a lot of memory cheat moments, isn't it? I feel like the breaking of the glass feels like a moment that happens, but it doesn't.
Yeah, a cliffhanger. Oh no, I know what you're going for. Sorry.
Yeah,
It's because you were saying before we recorded about how you thought that was the cliffhanger for part 3, or you always feel like it's going to be, but
yeah,
it
you
isn't.
feel
It's later in part 4.
yeah, you feel like it makes sense for it to be a cliffhanger, but it's not. So we have the Autons coming out of Marks and Sparks, and this is another brilliant moment. If we get the people running, and you see like the bodies slowly fall, and they're still running. There's something quite creepy about that, I feel.
Yeah,
So
it's a well done scene for 1972, isn't it?
yeah, and there's just something quite creepy about those Autons with a wig. It's the uncanny valley I feel of those ones actually.
Yeah, I find them more creepy than the new series ones. Maybe because they're not showing the chest off.
And it's the eyes I feel as well.
Yeah.
I know people complain, oh, you can see the performer's eyes, but I just think that adds to the creepiness. But I'm sure we'll dive more into the Autons when we get onto our like little mini review. I feel of it. So
I suppose it's often with retro stuff as well. When you like see stuff like that in a museum, it does feel more creepy than the modern stuff.
yes,
I suppose because it's not like quite as brand new, isn't it? Like you said, it's that uncanny valley again, but it's even more so where it's slightly old, slightly degrading.
yeah, it's like when you go to a museum and you see like the waxworks. There's something quite not quite right with them. Just gives me Spearhead from Space vibes actually. But going back to that, we have the Brigadier mustering the only people around in the unit base to do a raid on the old factory. When we have Scobie arrive, going, no, you can't do this, Brigadier, and the Doctor's like, well, do you mind saying a few words for us, General? And it's revealed that it is the facsimile of Scobie, and meaning
he like tricks them into thinking it's a microphone, but really it's the transmitter,
leading to them joining forces, and the Doctor and Liz sneak into the factory before any more deaths can happen, and they knock out an Auton, but the attack's starting to happen, and we get the Autons smashing through those doors, very much like the invasion as well. It sort of has the same location to it.
Yeah, it's like that industrial vibe, isn't it, to it all?
So that's all happening.
I'm assuming it's not shot exactly the same place, though, I don't think.
I don't think it is, but it's very similar, isn't it? Very similar.
Yeah, very similarly staged. And it's a nice contrast between this and the invasion to see the step up from that, where we're now in colour and the action's a little bit better, I'd say.
So this is when we get the confrontation between Channing and the Doctor. And we learn a bit more about the Nestines, about their corporeal form, like we were saying earlier.
Yeah. And if you live as a group, you could be destroyed as a group.
So this is when Plan hits an action, and Liz, switches on the machine, but nothing's working as the Nestine arrives out of its little tank and starts to. We get one of the famous John gurning faces. This becomes a big thing in the Purple. This is a nice little thing. So we get Liz tinkering with the machine. And
it's
then,
probably the one time in the story the production values sadly aren't quite as high, but at the same time, I can't really begrudge it for it, and it doesn't take me out at all.
Yeah, you have to sort of suspended disbelief, I feel.
Yeah.
So
it's still much higher quality than a lot of other stories of the time had.
Oh yeah. So the Doctor's managed to knock out the big old nesting consciousness creature, and Channing is now on the floor with a load of green goop, and the Autons are all deactivated. And
it's also quite creepy seeing Channing as an Auton, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't think of it.
Yeah. He's someone we've seen as a person this whole time, even though he's a very alien-like person in his personality. But nevertheless, you don't quite imagine it. Is there an original Channing out there somewhere? Is he a duplicate of someone they found, or is he like a completely made up fiction, I suppose?
I feel like he's got to be an original. I feel just to blend in. But yeah, it's a good point actually.
Yeah, because he's not quite as fake as a lot of the other ones, is he?
No, he hasn't got the waxy
yeah,
wake up. Yeah,
yeah. So I suppose they put a bit more effort into him because he's the face of them in a way.
So I get, yeah, it makes sense to divert all their energy there because I think there was a meteor shower 6 months before that one as well. So I guess that's when they started to. Maybe he was the first batch of them. Maybe I don't know the meteorites. But yeah, so after that we returned to Unit HQ, and the doctor's like, "Well, if you want my help, I'd like to keep that car." But no, you're gonna get a more iconic car in the next story. And the brigadier asks, "I don't even know your name," and we get a lovely moment of Dr. John Smith and a smile, and it begins the wonderful Pertwee years.
That smile, that damn smile.
Honestly,
way to end the first Third Doctor story.
Oh, it's so good. So it's a perfect way to end it, really.
Yeah, I love those just little moments between Doctor and the Brigadier at the end as well, where he's like, "When can we go and choose it?"
Yeah, it's like a kid.
He's so excited about. Yeah,
it's great.
Money? I don't want money. I just want really expensive things,
like fine wine.
And
just to raid the unit canteen at night.
Yeah.
So Spearhead from space. I feel like we're on the same page with this one. We've gushed over it, talk about the synopsis, and just in general of recording this little thing. Well, I say little, it's probably a big thing now. What do you make of it then?
I love it. It really is the perfect way to kickstart this era. Like we've said about it being shot on film, just adding so much, but also just the script as well has a lot of energy to it. I think it's really tight. Doesn't drag at all. It is very tightly written. Like you say about the memory cheating, you feel like that attack in part 4 could be the cliffhanger to part 3, but no. But it doesn't feel like it's rushed at the end there. You've only got 10 minutes to go after the attack, like the main event of the story begins. But it still all feels very tightly written and very well done. Yeah, I mean, the Autons themselves are a brilliant idea. It's that Robert Holmes and then later Stephen Moffat thing of taking something every day, like a mannequin, shop window dummy, and twisting that, making it into something creepy. And yeah, this story gets that very well.
And I think that's when Doctor, uses some from our everyday, and I think that's when it becomes the most effective and most scary and most frightening. And I think
it makes you look at the world in a different way sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think plastic was a relatively sort of new thing, I would say. So
this was when it was really starting to take over, wasn't it?
It was starting
to become popular.
Yeah, it was like a cheap thing to make, and lots of it really. And I think the Autons, they're just something really. I think this is the most creepiest they are in the show for me, because it was just for me having an Auton run was scary because the new series one they just sort of plod along and just go.
More of a jog, really, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and there's just something about this story what kind of haunted me as a kid because I lived by a wood. I still live by a wood actually, and I could every time I went in there, I just sort of could imagine an Auton just bursting out.
Yeah, you could imagine a dramatic zoom in on the trees, then suddenly they part.
Yeah, like there's just something quite creepy about them. Like I said, the eyes and just the wigs in the ones in episode 4, it just becomes even more creepy, really.
Yeah, I'd say maybe the Autons themselves are more creepy here, but I feel like the nesting consciousness threat as a whole is more creepy in Terror of the Autons.
But they use more of plastic in that. I feel like the daffodil, the toy, it utilizes that for. I feel like Robert Holmes refined it more in
creative ways of killing people, isn't it? It's like the Master's creativity mixing in with the Autons' aims.
Yeah, for sure. What else we got? It's like I say, it's just a pacey story. There's just a lot to love within it. I feel like it is just a perfect template for a post regeneration story. Just John's character, that you don't get the third Doctor straight away, but I feel like he's pretty much defined by midway through part two, because I think this is where you get the nice shift from the previous incarnation. You get the nice comedic moments of
the shoes.
Yeah. And I know that originally they wanted that sort of more zany Doctor, but I think John was like, no, I'm going to play it straight and serious. So that's a nice sort of transition from Troughton, I feel.
Yeah, where he's much more known as a character actor. And I mean, he still saw himself as a character actor, rightly so. But yeah, it was that ability to turn it into something a bit more comedic than he had done before.
And it just works so wonderful. The pairings of the Brig and Liz, how they just carry the show while the Doctor's in the coma. Channing himself by, I think, Hugh Burden, wonderfully played. There is that wonderful, it's just creepy when you see the Brigadier go to the factory and you see that sort of corrugated glass. It's wonderfully creepy.
I wonder if that's plastic.
Probably is plastic, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, he is just slightly off, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what makes it creepy. It's uncanny valley, but with personality, I suppose.
Yeah. It's just a sheer joy of the story, I feel.
It's very easy to stick on and watch all in one go, I'd say. And hopefully when it comes out on the Blu-ray collections, they do include an omnibus version of it like they had on the original VHS.
Yeah, because I think as well with this story, there is a lot of nostalgia, because it was, I think, my first experience of like a post-regeneration story in Classic Who.
Same here.
And I think this was my second Pertwee story I saw, because it was shown on BBC 4 for 2 nights, and then it was the Ark in Space. So I've got vivid memories of sitting down and watching this and just being, it felt like an event story, and it still holds that event feel for me now.
It's very much like the mission statement of the Pertwee era, isn't it?
Yes.
It sums up a lot of what's to come beautifully.
It's bold, it's colourful, and it's going, this is Doctor Who in the 1970s. Buckle up.
Yeah, it's very much, it's all guns blazing. For the start
quite
of this
literally,
new era. Yeah. Total destruction.
I mean, it definitely was a destruction for any show up against it, because I think it just blew them out of the water.
Yeah.
But, so good. This is one of the highlights of doing this series for me. Just revisited it because it's good, but you forget. It's one of those ones you forget. It is a classic.
Yeah.
It's the first proper Robert Holmes script, isn't it? It's the one where you're like, this is the story what put Bob Holmes on the map.
Yeah, this is like what got him. I mean, it certainly wasn't the Space Pirates.
This
is what got him working for Doctor Who again and again after this.
Yeah, it definitely sort of lends itself to Robert Holmes' sort of mythos of just scare the buggers. There is a lot of scare in it, really.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think it's safe to say that we both really do love this story, and it's definitely one of the best post-regeneration stories, if not the best.
Yeah,
and I think when it comes to like reruns and stuff, like when you have people picking one story from an era to rewatch, it's probably the only post-regeneration story that would be considered.
Yes, I'd say so.
Yeah.
I feel like as well, it feels like a good jumping on point to the classic series as well.
Yeah, so especially for like fans who know where things started with Rose. It's that nice mirror, isn't it? To go back to.
Yeah.
I suppose. Shall we rate it?
Yeah, let's go for it. I mean, I've got to be a 10.
No, I'm gonna go 9.
Oh, okay, all right.
I think it's very good, but
okay. There's just something really enjoyable about it, and just perfect for me. It's just the perfect way of introducing a Doctor. It handles trauma, the post regeneration trauma, great. It adds more to the mythos. There's a great creation of a monster, and it just sets a whole new era for the show in motion perfectly for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like there's anything particularly wrong with it to give it a 9. And like we said, 9's very high, but I feel like there's quite a few stories that are even better than this that sort of like deserve the 10 more.
Okay, are they on this list?
Maybe.
Okay. Okay.
Certainly in Doctor Who as a whole, I'm not sure about on this list, to be fair.
Okay.
We will see what's to come in the coming days and weeks, because it is only the 4th of December right now for you guys. It's the 6th of July for us. We are very far in advance. But tomorrow it shall be Planet of the Spiders.
Oh, better get the tissues ready.
Yeah. And I think this is going to be the first time where we feel the beginning and ending of an era.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. It definitely feels much more like... Well, we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Stay tuned for that. We don't want to give you too much just yet.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for listening. If you've enjoyed it, then please do like and subscribe, do all that jazzy stuff. And yeah, subscribe for more Regen content coming tomorrow in Planet of the Spiders. Body, we'll see you there. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.